Good morning, Rabotai. Breakfast and the class today is dedicated in memory and Leilui Nishmat Rabbi Yehuda ben Atar Alav Shalom Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vracha, sponsored anonymously. As well, the week of Kol Brew is dedicated in loving memory of Sam Yisrael Alav Shalom Leilui Nishmat Shalom and Rivka, sponsored by his son Isaac Sayed. Rabotai, I wanted to teach you something today which is a little bit different, maybe off the beaten path of what we would normally learn. And the message, though, I think is driven home in an even stronger way because of the metaphysical nature or the mystical nature of this idea. The Arizal says, if you take a look, when Am Yisrael reaches the borders of Eretz Yisrael, so the Jewish people decide that they need spies. We want spies to go into the land of Israel, and the Mossad was born. Okay? They needed spies to go into the land of Israel, to travel around. Amazing, by the way. Those spies also were not detected by anyone. All they found afterwards was one shoe. Either way, the point was that, Rabotai, as these agents were hired by Moshe to go into the land of Israel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it clear. He says to Moshe, he says, Shelach lecha anashim, these people, if you want to send, you can send. I'm telling you, I'm not telling you to send. And Moshe should have understood from that God was discouraging the sending of the spies. But ultimately, in the end, Moshe Rabbeinu acquiesces to the demands of the people, and they pick a bunch of people to go into the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now, we'll speak a little bit about the nature of these spies, about what drove them to do what they did. But suffice it to say for today's point that these people had an agenda. And when a person has an agenda, it becomes very difficult to see things through the perspective of another person who doesn't have the same agenda. Husbands and wives that are fighting all the time because they have different agendas, right? They want one thing because it works for them. The other person wants something else, works for them. So you find all the reasons to support your case, and the other person finds all the reasons to support the other person's case. So what happens, just so let's kind of role play this. So the husband will say, well, I think we should do this because of this. I think we should choose that because of that. I think we should move here because of this. And the wife will say, yeah, but what about these reasons? Meanwhile, no one actually brings up the valid reasons of the other person's side. They just say, my reasons have more weight. They're more important. They mean more, okay? So let's take a look at this. The Arizal writes that if you look at the spies, it doesn't say Shamua ben Zakur. It says Lemate Reuben, Shamua ben Zakur, Lemate Shimon, Lemate. Each one of the tribes is started off with the words Lemate to the tribe of X, Gadiel ben Vofsi. I don't know, whoever the names were for each and every tribe. The Arizal writes, what does this mean? Lemate this person. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu already got the inkling that there was going to be a problem here. So what did he do? He did something that was called Ibur Neshama, which is again beyond the scope of this class, explaining what this means. Ibur Neshama means, so to speak, the word Ibur comes from the word of pregnancy. It means when someone takes on the soul of someone else who's passed already. So someone that's lived in this world that maybe has not yet fulfilled their obligations, or for whatever reason, that person can, so to speak, be an add-on to a person's neshama in this world. Again, what these metaphysical, Kabbalistic ideas mean are beyond me, and especially at a 9 o'clock a.m. breakfast on a Sunday morning. Okay, it is not exactly the time and place. This needs to be done in the middle of the night when everyone's, kind of in that frame of mind, I think, okay? But at the same time, whatever this means, it means that there was supposed to be some sort of help from the add-on, the booster pack of a neshama of Reuven in the person Shamua ben Zakur, the booster pack of Shimon in the Shaliach, in the messenger and the spy that was on behalf of his. The Arizal even takes this point all the way down the line, and he says, so what happened when it came to Yosef, when Moshe was, so to speak, attaching or connecting the souls of the person who was the spy together with with all that works. But when it gets to Yosef, there's two tribes that come from Yosef. Says the Arizal, pay attention, you'll see. It says Limate Yosef, Limate Menashe. for the tribe of Yosef to the tribe of Menashe, and then it carries on. But when it comes to the other tribe of that came from Yosef, which is Ephraim, it doesn't say Limmate Yosef, Limmate Ephraim, Hoshea ben Nun. It just says Limmate Ephraim. So what happened to the tribe of Ephraim, which was fronted by Hoshea ben Nun? The Arizal writes that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed for Hoshea ben Nun and changed his name, so he gave, so to speak, the neshama of the tribe of Levi himself. Because Levi didn't have a representative, so Levi was given to Hoshea ben Nun. My friends, this is wild. So we're hearing this crazy idea that all the tribes had some access to these master magnificent souls, the souls of the tribes themselves. Why am I bringing all this to you? To show you one simple, powerful point. And that is, if you take a look at it, it says that Piryon Shlomo, after all of that, what happened? They still failed. What happened to the great souls? What happened to the Sadiqim? What happened to the Ibur Neshama of the Arizal? What happened? Who survives? Yoshua. Say the Mefarshim to teach us a tremendous lesson. You know why Hoshea ben Nun survived? Why Hoshea ben Nun survived? Why did Kalev ben Yifune? Why did they survive? Say the Mefarshim, they survived because they went lishtateach, to go and pray by the kever avot, by the graves of the tzaddikim. Some say it was only Kalev, okay? But either way, they prayed. Moshe Rabbeinu prayed for Hoshea ben Nun. Or Kalev went to pray by himself by the Kivrei Avot. You could have the best yichus in the world. Do you know who my grandfather is? Do you know who which family I come from? You know how many grandpas I have that were chief rabbis? I don't care. I don't care what your last name is. I don't care who you come from. I don't care your yichus. I don't care if people interceding on your behalf are the Shvatim, are the Avot themselves. A person has an obligation to pray for themselves, to pray in this world, not to rely on spiritual sigulot only. I'm tapping into this, I'm connecting to that. L'shem yichud kudsha berichu, in the souls of all the great tzaddikim. Wonderful. And I'm sure it helps on some level. But you need to pray here. That needs to be done here, right here, in this world also, to be able to affect the change. You know, they tell a story about the Baal Shem Tov. And I read the story and my eyes were popping out of their sockets. Baal Shem Tov's traveling with one of his students. He says, we need to make a stop. They go to some, broken down area where there's nothing there, probably the cheapest real estate in the town. And there's one little shack on the outskirts of town. Baal Shem Tov says, this is where we're going to go. The student already knows that everything weird the Baal Shem Tov does has a reason, so he doesn't bother asking, because he knows, just like everything else, wait and see. Huh? Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. So he doesn't stop asking already. They go there, the Baal Shem Tov walks in, he says, Shalom, how are you doing? Nice to see you. He says to the woman, he says, is there any way, I'm very hungry, we haven't eaten yet today. Is there any way we could have some food? The woman says, I'll tell you the truth, all the only food I have in the house is just this little bit of food left. I'm saving it for my husband who's coming back. He's, he's a wood chopper, he works hard all day. This is the only food I have to feed my husband. The rabbi says, I understand. He says, but I'm very hungry. Is there any way you can give it to me? She says, I'm saving it for my husband. He says, no, I understand that. He says, but I'm very hungry now. So I understand that your husband and that food, I've heard that already, You mentioned that earlier, but I'm very hungry. The student is sitting there looking at his rabbi, like I was when I was reading the story. Like this. Right? He keeps asking until eventually she gives him the food. What's she going to say? I'll tell my husband, the rabbi, he didn't let me, he demanded it, which I... Anyway, the rabbi finishes eating. The student's like, still red. He's like, can we go now? The rabbi says, no. He says, I'm very tired. Is there any way I could lie down? She says, I'll tell you the truth. She says, you see, there's no furniture here. The only thing we have is, we have the hay So I have prepared some hay for when my husband comes back. I can put it on the floor. He'll be exhausted. The floor is not so clean. It's wet. I put the hay down and he could sleep on the hay, but I only have this amount of hay for my husband when he comes home. The rabbi says that's very sad. He says, I'm very tired. Would you mind terribly if I lie down on the hay? The woman's like, it's for my husband. My husband needs the hay in order to sleep when he gets home, right? It's not, I need it for him. And the Baal Shem Tov says, I got you. The hay, please. And the woman, he keeps arguing with her until finally she gives him the hay. The student's about to lose his mind. The rabbi goes to sleep. Comfortable, sleeping the sleep of the blessed, Yani. An hour goes by, 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by. The guy comes home, starving. He's exhausted. Been chopping wood since 3 a.m. He says, good afternoon, honey. He says, I'm really hungry. Could you prepare the food? She says, we don't have any food, ma'ando. He says, what do you mean? She says, well, this rabbi came. I kept telling him that I was saving it for you, but he kept asking. Till eventually, the guy says, you gave it to a rabbi. The rabbi was, I guess he must have been very hungry if he took the food knowing that it was the only food that you had for me. All right, he says, I guess I'll just go to sleep and I'll wake up in the morning. She goes, well, about that. She pulls the curtain aside from the corner of the hut. The rabbi's sleeping there blissfully. She says, I don't have the hay. Anyway, done. Dunsky, like they say. He goes outside, he raises his hands to the heavens. He says, Master of the world. He says, I have nothing. The only thing I have is a little bit of food and a little bit of hay, so I get a little bit of sleep and a little bit of nourishment so I could go back for another day and work out in the fields and break my body. He says, is it not enough yet? Have you not taken enough from me yet? I can't anymore. I can't live like this. Anyway, the guy's sitting there screaming, crying outside from the prayers. What happens? The rabbi wakes up. In my brain, I was like, if I turn the page and the rabbi told him to keep it quiet because he's trying to sleep, I'm leaving. Rabbi leaves. They come back a year later to this town. And the rabbi tells the student, we have to make a stop. The student thinking, I'm sheep biflitch. I'm not. He says, where we go? He goes, remember where we went last time? The guy leads the carriages to the same place. They pull up, but now it's not a hut, it's a massive mansion. And there's farms, and there's this, and there's that. And the rabbi comes with his student, and he says, good afternoon. Good afternoon. The master of the house is now not out chopping wood. He has workers, he has this, he has that. The rabbi says, can we come in? He says, yes. And he asks the man, he says, can you tell me your story? And then I'll tell you mine. And the man says, I'll tell you, I used to be, I used to be, have a very hard time with all these different, things with work. He says, I gathered some scraps together, after my wood chopper days. I bought like 1 barrel of wine, and I figured maybe I'll sell the wine to somebody, and then maybe, at a little profit, then I'll buy some more wine. I couldn't anymore. My body was broken, my spirit was broken, He says, anyway, and that day, the day that I bought this little barrel of wine, that the 1 barrel that I had to sell, the local poritz, the local non-Jewish, authority came to my house and asked me for wine. All I had was this little bit of wine to sell, and if I gave him the wine, if I gave him a drink of wine, then I wouldn't have any for myself. So he says, so I poured in 1 cup of wine, and I mixed it with half a cup of water. Just, so that I would save some, so that I'd have some to sell. I served it to the poritz. The poritz said he'd never had such wine in his life. It was the most delicious wine. He told everybody in the town, and pretty soon there was a long line of people waiting outside, asking me for wine. He says, that bottle of wine, I bought many more. I stretched the bottle with water, but somehow I was blessed from Hashem that no matter what I served, the word on the street was that I had the best wine in town. And these guys, they lived to drink. You don't know, he says, in a matter of a short amount of time, I became one of the wealthiest people in town. I rebuilt my shack. I built myself a thing. I took care of my wife like a queen. And this is where I am today. And the Baal Shem Tov smiles. And he says, and now let me tell you my story. He says, I knew, Beruach HaKodesh, I understood that you were supposed to be a wealthy man a long time ago. But there was never a point in your life when you prayed to God from the depth of your heart. Because there was always just enough for you to kind of feel safe enough, relaxed enough, to be able to just kind of go from miserable existence on day 1 to miserable existence on day 2 to miserable existence on day 3. If I hadn't come and taken the little bit of food and the little mattress that you had on that one day, you might never have prayed in your life. You might never have received the blessing that was sitting there waiting for a prayer from the depths of your heart to come down to this earth. He says, that's my part of the story. My friends, I look at this story and I see the fact that the Torah tells us that these were great men. The fact that Torah tells us that they are Nisi'ei Ha'edahem, they are the leaders of the people. I see the Arizal telling me that not only are they great people, but they have the souls of even greater people attached to them. Magnificent. Wonderful. And then they go and they make the biggest mistake of their lives. And then they go and make a mistake that actually sets back the Jewish people, the whole Jewish nation, 40 years in the desert. What was missing? A pit stop at the Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Had they, on the Shelach Lecha tour bus agency, had they taken a pit stop, taken the bus with Kalev, instead of making him go in an Uber or get by himself to the kever, if they'd gone with him to the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the Jewish people would not have had the story of the desert. The spies would not have, unfortunately, died in the aftermath of that story. All would have been rectified through the power of what? Of tefillah. My friends, oftentimes we don't understand the power of tefillah, and for many of us, the reason why we don't understand it is because we become jaded. We prayed for something once and it didn't work. We prayed for it again, it didn't work. Eventually you think to yourself, So you know what you do? Even when you pray as a kind of let's cover the bases way. Like, you know what, if this works, okay, I'll throw up this Hail Mary, and if it works, all right, I have nothing to lose. Anyway, I was losing the game. A prayer like that doesn't work, Rabotai. It needs to come from the depths of a person's heart, where a person realizes that without Borei Olam, I can't, I'm nothing. And the irony is that the greater a person is, the more mystical things he has, and the fact that he's connected with this and connected with that, the more he thinks, I don't need that prayer. It took the guy getting to a place where he had nothing at all. Zero, literally. Now, a drop of food in his belly, not an ability to sleep, to take a nap, to refresh himself. When suddenly he realized that if Hashem doesn't help him, no one will. It's so funny. I see this line all the time. At the end of the Tachanun, right? It says, En lano melech ela ata. We have all these lines where in the end of the Tachanunim, it says, we have only one king but you, without you we're nothing. Right? With Hashem, please, if you don't do it, no one, if you don't do it, no one can. Right? Literally, with the whole of the Tachanunim is that. But then we feel like, we're very happy that today we had Kol Ram and we skipped. Sorry, we had Yeshim and we skipped the Tachanun. And the funny thing to me is I'm of two minds. On the one hand, on the day there's no Tahanun, you don't have the what's it called? You don't have the Tahanun, so people are happier when they leave the shul. It's a little bit earlier. They come down to the class, a little bit of a bigger smile. On the other hand, I'm thinking to myself, we didn't get those words in. En lanu melech ela ata. We don't have a king but you. No one can do anything for me except for you. If you really said those words with conviction, you wouldn't be in a rush to leave the shul. Because the reason why you're in a rush to leave the shul is because you're trying to get to work. But if you understood that the work actually is not going to make you that money, That you can go to work an hour early and accomplish nothing in that hour, or you can go to work an hour late and accomplish more than you accomplished on the day that you came in early, which all of us have experienced in the working world, right? We've all experienced that there are projects that we worked so hard on that didn't deliver anything. And then there's a project that, randomly you got an email. All you had to do was forward the email, and all of a sudden you got a new account. It's wild. From those instances, we wind up seeing this. There's a very famous pasuk. The pasuk says, "Mibsari echze Eloka." From my flesh I see Borei Olam. Mibsari echze Eloka. And I always say this. This is so interesting. The literal interpretation of what David HaMelech was saying is, I see from the complexity of my body, of my bodily functions, I see the fact that there's a divine designer. I see that God created the world. You know why? Because look at how complicated the body is. We talked about this yesterday at the Shabbat table. I don't know if you know, when you eat food, what happens? It goes into your stomach, and in your stomach there are acids in your stomach. Those acids are so strong that if you took some of your stomach acid and poured it on the floor, it would eat a hole through a wooden floor. Do you know that? It's so caustic, the acid. It's so strong. It's stronger than battery acid. Think about the fact that when you swallow chunks of meat, so sometimes you chew it till it's nothing. But a lot of times you give it a couple of chews and you swallowed a hunk of meat. How did the body get rid of that? It goes in, the acid literally destroys it. So if acid can take a steak and turn it into nothing, can break down meat, what is your stomach made out of? Meat. How could the same acid that destroys the meat not destroy your stomach? And you know what the answer is? Borei Olam says, no, I got this, don't worry. I'm going to put a lining in your stomach, which is anti-acid. So that place it won't burn. But when you ever have a little bit of acid reflux, when the acid goes to a place where it's not supposed to, you feel like your throat is on fire when you throw up. What's happening? You're taking some of that stomach acid out of its proper place. Outside of its proper place, it's eating away at your throat. You understand? Is this clear to everybody? My friends, this is so interesting. From my body, I see the complexity of my bodily functions, the way Hashem designed our body. I see God in the world. But I also think that there's another interpretation. I have the vaccine. There's another interpretation for Mibsari Echze Eloka. You know how I look at it? I look at my skin and I see God. Sometimes you do something, you work really hard, right, and you're sweating and you got nothing. And sometimes you didn't sweat at all and you hit a home run. Mibsari, just by looking at my skin, looking at myself, how hard I was working. Is it flushed red from effort? Or am I relaxed sitting there, made a phone call at the pool, and now I have money for this week? Are we seeing this? Mibsari, from the state of my body, from the state of my actual skin, sometimes I can see God. And if that's the case, how could we run? Why would we run? Why would we have our talet and tefillin off and out the door of the shul if we actually felt that way? A tefillah that comes from the depth of a person's soul can change their life. But sometimes we need to actually be put in a situation like the Baal Shem Tov did to this unfortunate man, until the person realizes that they don't have a move but to pray to Hashem. Nothing else will help. Not your yichus, not the soul that's attached to you, not the fact that you went for a beracha to who knows who. Pray to God. Karov Adonai lechol kore'av. God is close to all those that call out, with one caveat: lechol asher yikreuhu be'emet. All those that call out to Him authentically, in truth, genuinely. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen v'amen. Rabbi